Hello again from our Texas podcast. We are just delighted to have Dr. Marvin Dulaney. Uh, I should say Dr. W. Marvin Dulaney, longtime resident, longtime history professor at UT Arlington, and most currently he is the, let's see here, there's a big title here, Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer of the African American Museum in Dallas. Welcome, Dr. Marvin Dulaney.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Berry.
Look here, man. I know that there's just tons of folks who feel like me. We're just delighted to have conversations with you, to know all the work that you've done, and we'll get into all of that. But you know, it's just a joy to again talk to you. There were many times that when we published the magazine that you wrote articles for us. So again,
Yes.
we're thankful that you still think kindly of us
Oh,
here
for
at
sure. Yeah.
Now, what drew you to the African American Museum in Dallas? I mean, you've retired and all that, but what drew you?
Sure. Can I give you the long answer?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take you all the way back to when I was 17. But I won't cover all that time. But when I was 17, I became motivated to study Black studies. You know, the Black Studies movement was starting in 1967 and 1968. So I specifically went to college to become a teacher of African American history. I get out and I, work in various jobs, and I start my first teaching job at UTA in 1986. And I found that the majority of the students that I was teaching were white students. And then there's nothing wrong with that. But obviously, I went to college to teach African American history to the African American community. So in '86, I decided to volunteer at the African American Museum. So you see, I got us there pretty quick, and because I wanted to indeed work with the African American community in terms of presenting history, presenting our culture, educating our people, because I believe very strongly that we need to know our history in order to understand where we have been, how we can address our current situation, and indeed how we can prepare for the future. So basically, the African American Museum became the place to do that, because the African American Museum was, at that time, obviously, at Bishop College. And this is 1986.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just give you a little bit of history. The museum started at Bishop in 1974.
Right.
And again, to present exhibitions, to tell the story about the African American experience in Texas, to present African art and African American art. And so it was an ideal place for someone like me who wanted to address, or who wanted to help educate the community about the African and African American experience.
Well, it was, to me, we're talking about early 80s, 70s. That was fairly novel in Texas. It may have been something really forthright and progressive in California, New York, but that's really saying something here in Texas.
Yes, it was. I came to Texas in 1981 after, again, earning a history degree at Ohio State University, and master's and PhD. And I come here, and there's this mythology about Black history and about the history of the state. One of the things one of the myths that I learned was that slavery was never important in Texas. Imagine that. The second myth I learned was that there was no need for there to be a civil rights movement in Texas, because Texas was a Western state. It was not like that old South of Mississippi and Virginia and Alabama, where they had to march in the streets and raise hell in order to get basic voting rights and civil rights. Texas was different, allegedly. It's cowboys, it's cattle drives. It's the Alamo and all these things, and that Black people, even though we were here, we weren't of that much importance or significant in the history of the state. So part of what I had to do when I came here, as I said in 1981, was begin the process of revising or doing what they call revisionism of the state's history, particularly in terms of how it explained the history and participation of African Americans in the Alamo, the Texas Revolution, the Civil War, and so on.
Yeah. I know you're going to speak to us more about the museum. So perhaps after you talk a little bit more about the museum, we can come back to the obstacles, the myths,
yes,
the myths.
Yes.
Even plain. Okay, so why do you think so many people support this African American museum?
Well, we're sort of the only game in town when you get right down to it. There's no other institution in the city of Dallas that's promoting the history and culture of African Americans. There's now, since the museum started in '74, so we're basically the oldest museum in the state of Texas, dealing with the African American experience. This obviously there's about 4 or 5 more museums across the state. One in Brazos, one in Brazos County. There's a new one in Houston. There's the Booker T. Washington Institute in Austin. But in 1974 through the 80s, we're the only game in town, and so people who were interested in African American history literally and logically came to the African American Museum to get an explanation, to see the exhibitions and displays about our history and culture, because they couldn't get it anywhere else. The Dallas Museum of Art, for example, and I don't mean to be critical of the DMA, on occasion they would do an exhibition featuring, say, African art. I remember, I guess it was actually about late 80s, they brought in Babatunde Olatunji. I don't know whether you know him, because they were doing an African art exhibition. Babatunde Olatunji is his famous African drummer. And so they had him at the DMA doing this concert. I mean, he turned it out. The place was just electric. Well, I don't know, when you hear African drums, real ones, they just turn you on. So here he is at the DMA in conjunction, I guess, again, this is late 80s, doing his thing and in conjunction with this African art exhibit. But again, that's one and few and far between all of their other exhibitions. So we at the African American Museum, we do exhibitions all of the time dealing with African American history. For example, currently we have an exhibition there called Men of Change. And it's sort of interesting. This is a Smithsonian exhibition that we borrowed for, I guess, 4 months. And it deals with what role African American men have played in American history, American culture, American civil rights, American literary arts. So you have information presented about, let's say, LeBron James, James Baldwin, Charles Hamilton Houston, the famous NAACP lawyer. So even some contemporary people like what's his name, Kendall. Anyway, it'll come to me. So it's not just old and African Americans who have passed. There are people, as I said, like LeBron James, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who wrote for the Atlantic and wrote the piece on the case for reparations. So you have you have this mixture then of African Americans who have passed with contemporary African Americans, and of course the younger generation, like Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Do you find that a lot of folks compartmentalize those from the past from folks of today?
Yes. The one thing that sort of has struck me throughout my teaching career is that most African Americans don't know about leaders and people, African Americans who have contributed from the past. You know, they may know about a Du Bois, they may know about a James Weldon Johnson, they may know about James Baldwin,
Yes.
but some of the folks like a Charles Hamilton Houston, most people won't know that name,
Yes.
and it's sort of ironic because Charles Hamilton Houston, you know, was a person who in the 1930s. You should look at the time period I'm talking about. Developed a strategy for the NAACP to begin desegregating schools all across the country, and so but nobody knows his name, and so what I find is most African Americans know about contemporary people,
Yes.
you know, and they listen and read their works and their music
Yes.
and so on.
Yes.
But you know, they won't know some of these older scholars and these older contributors who have indeed helped to make our lives what they are. Our lives are today.
Two things. One is I met the grandson of Charles Hamilton Houston, my nephew, and he went to school.
Uh-huh.
So when we were in Houston in July, we met up again. And so I got a chance to chat with him briefly. He's also a lawyer in the Houston area. So
Okay.
saying to you, it's really neat to kind of bring a new name, a grandson who currently still carries the name of his grandfather. The other one is what is the danger? What is the danger of us not making a connection between those who were pioneers and were activists and were thought-provoking folks in the past with folks today?
Yeah.
The danger?
The danger is that we will grow up miseducated and we will make some serious mistakes. You know, and I hate to personify this or make this sort of personal. You know, I happened to grow up in the 1960s, you know, and I didn't really start looking at our experience and reading the literature by James Weldon Johnson, Lerone Bennett, and W.E.B. Du Bois until the late 60s, early 70s. So when we started with what I call and what everybody calls the Black Studies movement, we thought we were the first. We thought that our parents had been jive, lackadaisical, and had not taken care of business, and had let us sort of fall into this complacency and this acceptance of segregation and the rest of racism and this whole belief that all these myths about Black people. When in reality, if we had been able to study our history, you know, we would have understood that we indeed were carrying on a tradition, a movement that had started in the 19th century. But again, because we were miseducated so well. Again, I went to so-called integrated schools in Alliance, Ohio. And of course, I always tell people for the entire 12, 13 years of my education, I did not learn about a single African or African-American man or woman who had ever done anything in history. So here I am, just completely miseducated, believing some of the myths. You know, in fact, when I did my dissertation research at Ohio State University, I started on the basis and the belief that Black people indeed were the problems they were the ones who created the crime problems in our society. I didn't know that indeed Black people before me had always tried to address the crime problems, going all the way back. You know, Du Bois did this publication, I guess, in 1904. You know, talking about the Negro in crime and looking at it historically, and of course pointing out again something I had no clue about, that it was because the system in our country immediately after the Civil War, developed a criminal justice system aimed at Black people and aimed at returning them to slavery or quasi-slavery through the convict lease system and the penal system that would basically re-enslave them, arrest them on trumped up charges and then hire them out to plantation owners.
Yes.
So again, here I am though thinking in 1976 and 72 that we are the problem.
Yes.
Too many of us commit crimes, and so let's get these Negroes who look like me off the street again. So you see that problem that here I am, an African American male, looking at a whole lot of African males as being the problem in terms of our criminal justice system and crime, when in reality wasn't even true. It was the biggest lie ever told. So it took me doing some serious research and looking at who actually committed the crime. Because let me just say, the reality was that Black and white people commit crimes at the same percentage, at the same level. We're not the problems in terms of crimes in our communities. Most of the crime wasn't based on race in our society. It's based on economics. It's based on the fact that people just don't have what they need. And so sometimes they seek other ways to get what they want in terms of sustaining themselves. And so that's a classic example of why we must understand and study our past in order to use it as an explanation for our present, and of course to do our planning to correct and design and prepare for our future. So can you imagine that here I am, a Black male in 1972, again at Ohio State University, acting on one of the tenets of Black studies, that our studies and our research should address problems in our community. And I'm looking at other Black males as the problem. I'm one of them, So in reality, hey, I'm one of the problems too, which indeed was not true. It was a big lie. So I'm perpetuating the big lie about Black males. And of course, as we know, Black males have been under attack in our society since the end of slavery, since 1865. And they've been very successful in terms of developing stereotypes about us, about who we are.
Sure, especially the media.
Yes.
How about this? When it comes to the museum, what connections do you hope people make when they attend, when they understand the mission of an African American museum?
Well, obviously, as a staff member at the museum, I want them to make the connection of joining us as members.
Yes.
But the other side, other things I want them to, connections I want them to make is that we represent them. That not only are we trying to educate them about our history and our culture, but we all are also trying to give them an opportunity to come in and participate. We offer camps, we offer classes, we do a whole variety of activities. We have a book festival in August. We have the Blues and Jazz Festival, which we've had to cancel this year in early September. We have a Women's History Month program, which indeed will connect them with some of the movers and shakers in the African American community who are women. We have summer camps for children. So basically, what we're trying to do overall is make sure that the community knows that what we're doing is not something that's up here and that they can't experience and participate in, but it's something that is aimed at involving them and bringing them into the museum to learn and to participate in the things that we are doing. And plus, guess what? The museum is free. We don't even charge an admission fee. So so our primary goal right off the bat, if they come and visit,
Yes.
is that they'll go through the galleries. You know, we have 5 galleries at the museum. They'll go through the galleries and learn about African American folk art, learn about the African Americans and the history of Dallas, uh, learn about whatever else we got in the other 3 galleries, you know, such as this Men of Change exhibition. And so then they can join us for a minimal fee. I think the cheapest membership at the museum is $35,
Mhm.
and then they'll get this information. We'll send them emails. They'll be able to access our website and find out what's going on a regular basis, so that they can come out and learn, come out and enrich themselves. So we're trying to connect
Yeah.
directly with the community. We don't want to be like, and again, I'm not trying to put down the DMA, but it's a different experience. We don't want to be like the Dallas Museum of Art, you know, where you got to pay a fee, where most of the art and the exhibitions aren't related to the African American experience.
I got you. And to quote the ordinary citizen, those who live here,
Yes.
work in all the different jobs that we have.
Yes. Now, we're not an elitist organization like most museums.
Okay.
You know, historically, museums have been for the middle and upper class,
Right.
and not, they have not aimed their, they have not addressed the audience below that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to show you a couple of images
Okay.
from the museum, and let us know a little bit more about what we're looking at. Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Foster, can you help us out? Here we go.
Okay. This is a bill of sale from 1856.
Uh-huh.
And it's for a young African American male. I think they sold him for $1,325. A local donor gave this to us, and I can't recall his name right off the bat. But in fact, it's 1859. Excuse me. It's 1859. This is a piece that's in our collection, showing how African Americans were bought and sold in the slave trade in the what we call the antebellum period. That is the period before the Civil War, between 1790 and 1860. So it's a really valuable document because it shows. Here's an African American male. In fact, I'm just going to use the terms that were used then. This is a Negro in 1859 who was worth $1,375, and during that time, African American males were at a premium because they were the ones who did most of the work. Okay. You know, and it was often the back-breaking work.
Yes.
Of working in the fields, being what was called field slaves.
Yes.
And basically, you know, he's very valuable. He's very valuable because a woman of the same age, for example, would probably only generate about maybe $750. Okay. Because indeed she couldn't do the type of work that this African American male could. Okay.
All right. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Was this from a sale in Texas?
This is from a sale in Texas, yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh. These are some African masks. In fact, they're sort of ceremonial masks. Africans, they come from West Africa. Mm-hmm. They are sort of masks that were used in sort of some of the ritualistic experiences and ceremonial experiences of Africans in West Africa. They would actually put these masks on their head and dance with them in what we would call the circle of culture. They would gather in a circle with these masks on, depending on whether they're celebrating the harvest, celebrating the ancestors, or celebrating some particular event in the community. These masks would be a part of that celebration and the dance that they would do.
Okay.
Yeah. and many of them represented the ancestors.
Okay.
Again, these are actual artifacts that we have in our collection.
Okay.
I actually like this one. I'm actually in the process of trying to put together a history of African Americans in Dallas. So this is an important document. You see, they're celebrating the Golden Jubilee, or the 50-year anniversary of the Idlewild Club, or the Idlewild Cotillion Club in Dallas. This was the program for that particular event. Yeah. Now, the Idlewild Club represented some of the leading middle-class African Americans in the city of Dallas. Yeah. You would have people like A. Maceo Smith. Yeah. In this club, and his wife, or particularly his wife, and basically they would sponsor these young ladies, okay, basically sort of introducing them to African American society at a particular time. So here they're celebrating the fact that they've done this for 50 years in Dallas. And this again, it represents some of the leading African Americans in the city of Dallas.
Like debutantes, that sort of thing.
Yes. This is like it's like a debutante ball.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is one of our brochures. I think we did this one in 1985, and you see. At that time, we were still calling ourselves the Museum of African American Life and Culture. The museum has changed its name 3 times. Mm-hmm. It started out in 1974 as the Southwest Center for Black Art at Bishop College. Yeah. Then in 72, 73, it became the museum, in 82, 83, it became the Museum of African American Life and Culture. And by the way, I actually put this on our website to represent the sort of the evolution of the African American Museum over time. Yes. So this brochure contained our programs for that particular year. And you see it has one of our African art pieces on the cover. Yeah. We would change the name of the museum again in 1993 when we opened the building in Fair Park. At that point, it became the African American Museum.
I see. Okay.
Mm-hmm. This is a Clementine Hunter piece, and it's called Cotton Harvest. You see earlier, when you were talking to me, I couldn't call the name of it, but Clementine Hunter was one of the most important African American folk artists of the 20th century. So we actually have this hanging in our folk art gallery, and this is a very valuable piece. We have 2 pieces by Clementine Hunter. Clementine Hunter was from Louisiana. Okay. She's a folk artist. Now, for those who don't know, there's a difference between a folk artist and a fine artist. When I take people through the museum, I take them through our folk art gallery, and I try to say, do you know the difference between a folk artist and a fine artist? Most people don't. Yeah. A folk artist is actually an untrained artist, a person like you and me, who has been inspired to just create something. Yeah. In most cases, the folk artists are doing sort of religious pieces because it's their religious spirit and inspiration that motivates them to create the art. So indeed, Clementine Hunter was not trained as an artist. She literally, again, sort of just did this piece because she was inspired to do it. A fine artist, again, is someone who's been to art school, who has a BFA or an MFA. Yeah.
Okay.
This is a bed also in our folk art gallery by Thomas Day. Now, what many people don't realize is that African Americans, particularly when they were enslaved, made all of the furniture on those plantations. And so, yeah, yeah. And of course, they were really good, fine craftsmen in doing beds and cabinets on those plantations. And so this one was done in particular by Thomas Day, who was an enslaved African-American folk artist or furniture maker in North Carolina. This is a self-portrait by Walter Wynn. Walter Wynn was a local artist here in Dallas. Did a whole variety of pieces. We've got about 5 or 6 pieces of his work. And again, that the image there is a self-portrait, but behind him is a very important piece. It's a statue that he did that he was commissioned to do in front of the Martin Luther King Center in Dallas on Martin Luther King Boulevard. I think he finished this piece in 1975.
Wow.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Again, we have the Sepia magazine collection. Sepia was, I always like to say, the poor man's ebony. Okay. It started as a magazine started in 1946 by an African American who was a preacher actually over in Fort Worth. Can you imagine? Many people didn't know that this magazine started in Fort Worth. He was bought out by a white magazine publisher, I believe, in 1952, and then the magazine was basically published from 1946 up to about 1972 before it went out of business. We were able to get the photographs. And again, I call it the poor man's ebony because all of the photographs in sepia were black and white,
yeah,
as opposed to ebony, which was, a full color, So, and again, I'm sorry, I can't call the original editor's name. But Mr. Barry, you'd be real interested in the fact that, he's sort of did like you have done, started his own magazine from scratch in order to appeal to an audience. And again, he was out of Fort Worth. He was a preacher out of Fort Worth and was able to run it for 6 years. And then, as I said, he was bought out in 1952, and they continued to publish the magazine. We have all of the photographs.
Wow.
That were published in sepia between, again, 1956 and 1972. And again, it's like ebony, but it's sort of like the poor man's ebony, because they have all the entertainers in there, from and politicians. As you see, this is Yvonne Burke, who was elected to Congress in, I can believe 1974, 76, or 1976 from California. But we have Aretha Franklin, we have James Brown, we have all these images of these entertainers and politicians. Malcolm X, Fidel Castro. For example, Fidel Castro came to the United States in 1962. So we have an image of Fidel Castro and Malcolm X at the Teresa Hotel in New York City in 1962. Again, published in sepia.
Wow, that's something. That really is.
Yeah. I can't say too much about this piece, but as you see, it's also by Thomas Day. Okay. It's a cabinet, basically designed and made by, as I said, one of the early African American furniture makers, Thomas Day.
Okay.
And it's in our folk art. It's in our folk and decorative arts gallery.
Do you think? There's one more. Sorry.
What? Go ahead and ask your question.
Well, it was about a sepia. We have a magazine from 1949, published in Fort Worth, and I'm trying to think of the fellow's name, but I cannot. But it was in black and white. Spot. That was the name of the magazine. Spot.
Okay.
And he put it was either Spot or Spotlight, but the publisher was able to put the quote spotlight on those he published articles and photographs of those who were doing things in Fort Worth. And it was, again, this is 1949.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope to have it available next time we talk. Go ahead.
Okay. This is a piece we recently acquired. We do the Carol Harris Sims Juried Art Show every year. Starts in November and runs through March. And we we buy the winners. This particular piece won for painting. It's by Jeremy, I believe the young man's name is Connors, Jeremy Connors. And as you see, the title of it is called Turn the Other Cheek. We posted it on our website because we wanted to highlight some of our recent acquisitions. So this is very recent. I think they just did the reception to award the winners in June of this particular year. And again, what we do is, in the name of Carol Harris Sims, Carol Harris Sims was the chairman of the art department at Prairie View A&M, and so they decided to name the competition after him. So Jeremy Connors then won the award. We give 5 awards: painting, drawing, best in show, photography, and so on. And so he won it for painting with this particular piece.
Okay.
This is by Vicki Meek. Vicki Meek is a local artist. We just did a show with her that started last November, actually last October, and it ended in March. She had about 35 pieces at the museum. And as you see, the title of it is Violence to Self-Hate. There's an accompanying piece, and again, I won't call it a painting. She sort of does these pieces that are social commentary, and the main thing that she was attempting to do with the 2 pieces was address black on black violence as a representation of self-hate among African Americans. So this is also a piece that's in our collection, and as you know, it's on our website.
Okay. All right. Just a few more minutes before we go. How difficult has the pandemic been in trying to make sure that the museum still has programs and to let folks know, that you're still around, you're wanting to be of a service as possible? How difficult has it been?
It has been very difficult. I started my full-time position with the museum in February of 2020. And then, when I took this on, I took it on for a year. Of course, it's been beyond a year now.
Yes.
And so then in March 10th, I'm informed that we're shutting down, March 10th, 2020, that we're shutting down the museum. So I said, you know what? This ain't too bad then. I get to work from home. I don't have to get out there and fight that traffic, go and get into the museum every day. And so I'm home, working from home. I actually was able to write a piece for the Handbook of African American Texas on a local educator by the name of N.W. Harley. Well, in May, then I get the call that we were in the midst of a renovation, and so I had to start coming in every day to move exhibitions, to move furniture, and so on out of the way of the renovation. So then, from May to September, I'm working like anybody else. We reopened in September of 2020. But basically, it was real difficult. We had to figure out then, what do we do between March and September? So we did an online camp, art camp for for children, an online history camp for children. And so again, that sort of limited the numbers because most children don't have access to computers or their parents are working and they can't be there during the day.
Yeah.
So I think we sort of averaged about 20 students in those two camps that we did in July and August. We did go ahead and work with Big Thought to do a face-to-face camp. And we put them in the galleries since our galleries were empty. Again, since we weren't doing anything from September, we were able to use the galleries because the galleries have these high ceilings, 50 feet in the air, and so which would then not be the children would not be so susceptible to the pandemic or to COVID. And we limited the number of the children that we did in those camps. So, and that was, again, very difficult trying to pull all this together. The children had to be masked. They were spaced out. They spaced the toilets, and they shut down the drinking fountains, everything, trying to keep the children from catching COVID during the face-to-face camps last August that we did with Big Thought. So we did an online history online history class, and in fact, that was just about. And we did Juneteenth online. So as you see, we found a way to do things, but it was a little difficult and different, versus being face to face. We couldn't do large programs at all in the building, obviously. Let's see, we lost 5 staff members. Dr. Robinson had to furlough 5 staff members because we got a PPE grant loan, and we were able to carry them all the way up to August. With them not coming in. But after that, Dr. Robinson had no choice but to furlough them because he couldn't afford to continue to pay them. So basically, the pandemic limited the number of people, obviously, that could come in the building, which of course it was 0 between March and September. And then when they come into the building, they give donations, they use our gift shop, we can promote memberships, and so we were not able to do any of that during the pandemic. So it cut our budget, cut our revenues by about 60%.
Well, I'm hoping that the Delta variant, still raging, can be succumbed by more people taking the booster shot or getting vaccinated. But that's a hope against what Texas governors want to do.
Right.
But my hope is that is that more people will see the video, the podcast, and we'll have some of these images a part of it. And hopefully the video that you talked about, we can attach it at the end of this.
Yes.
So that
it's a good video, by the way. So I hope you do, because it'll show Vicki Meeks. It'll show Vicki Meeks exhibition, which is really nice.
Good. And lastly, I truly hope that there are other times that you will favor us with what you know about Texas history.
Okay.
We can get a handle on making connections of yesteryear to today.
Yes.
So please favor us with more time.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm as I say, I'm game. So just let me know.
One last thing you'd like to say about the museum? Just anything you'd like to say? Something that I didn't bring up?
Sure. That we are currently open today. Now we're running our full schedule.
Okay.
Tuesdays through Fridays we're open from 11 to 5. On Saturdays we're open from 10 to 5. We've canceled a couple programs like the Blues and Jazz Festival, but we're going to be opening 3 new exhibitions about September the 22nd in conjunction with the State Fair.
Okay.
All right.
And Dr. Marvin Dulaney, it's just a joy to be with you, and we look forward to more conversations with you. Okay?
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, not a problem.
Yeah.
This ends another edition of Our Texas. Everyone, be safe. Adios.
All right. Bye-bye.
Here, what I was telling you about the Emancipation, here's a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation on printed paper.
It may not be much of an exaggeration to say that Dr. Harry Robinson embodies African American history in Dallas. Not only was he the driving force behind the construction of the African American Museum at Fair Park more than 25 years ago, he was responsible for it opening 20 years before that on the campus of what is now Paul Quinn College. And he's showing no signs of slowing down.
Well, it's a chronicle of the African American experience.
He recently took us on a tour of the museum and its most recent exhibit, the Kinsey Collection.
The Kinsey Collection is probably the most comprehensive collection in private hands of African Americana. This is a combination of art and history. And if you were to view this exhibition or pick up the catalog, it's really a history book, a textbook of African American history.
Among the items on display, the earliest known black baptismal certificate dated 1595 in St. Augustine, Florida, slave inventories, a copy of a slave insurance policy, and a slave shackle.
You see a lot of things, you hear a lot of things, but here you have the actual documentation of African American history. There's no question about that shackle over there. There's no question about that Emancipation Proclamation. You actually see that, yeah, there was a document.
And in another part of the museum, facing the rising sun.
The exhibition is really a history of Black Dallas in what was called Short North Dallas, which is now Uptown.
It shows what life was like here 100 years ago in the heart of the black community and what death was like too.
All of these were bodies that were buried there.
Many of the artifacts resulted from an excavation project in the late 80s when the state was widening Central Expressway at Lemon Avenue on land that had been a burial ground for African Americans dating back to the Civil War. The remains were reinterred, and today a memorial sits at Freedman Cemetery along with about 5,000 unmarked graves. And the exhibition itself?
That exhibition was supposed to be for 1 year.
Yeah, how long's it been?
And that was in 2000. And it became so popular we had to leave it up. And it's a permanent exhibition now.
It's a Texas treasure you need to see for yourself.